sorry.
Okay, you want that door closed?
I take a lot of space.
Okay.
I have a lot of,
All right, ready, guys?
probably look very disorganized.
Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting and public hearing for Monday, December 14th, 2015. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes. Mr. Batanti?
Here.
Mr. Brado?
Here.
Mr. Capral?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt? Here. Mr. Verkest?
Here. During the forum, there was a discussion regarding the consent agenda to remove item 4, and we're going to place it in the regular agenda. So the next on our agenda would be approval of the consent agenda without item 4, which would include approval of the regular board meeting minutes of November 23rd, 2015, the workshop meeting minutes of November 18th, 2015, and the workshop meeting minutes of November 30th, 2015. Approval of the bills in the amount of $727,471.66. Approval of the November 2015 revenue and expenditure report. Approval of the SMART Specialized Services Operation Assistant Program third-party contract in the amount of $3,241, and concurrence to repair the Stanley Impact Breaker for the Water and Sewer Department at a cost not to exceed $6,750 from Jack Doheny Supplies Incorporated. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion with the bills in the amount of $727,471.66.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Tominello, a support by Mr. Batanti to approve the consent agenda, item 4 being removed. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. There are some proposed revisions, and I'll try to summarize those. There is an emergency addendum dated 12/11 that had to do with the fire department budget. I'm proposing that as item A1. Item 4 from the consent agenda, I'm proposing as item A2. Item F3 on the agenda, I'm proposing as item A3, moving that up. And the second emergency addendum regarding the coastal zone management grant, I'm proposing for item F3. So I'll be looking for a motion to approve the agenda with those amendments.
Make a motion to approve the agenda with the amendments as stated.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Capral. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on the agenda is announcements. Maybe I'll defer to Mr. Capral to tell us how our visit from Santa Claus went. But in the meantime, I can say the Board of Trustees had asked the Supervisor's Office, along with the Clerk's Office, to conduct a survey regarding the bridges in the Huron Point subdivision. Out of 700 and I believe 744, I don't remember exactly, possible responses. We received 77.1% of the people that were sent a survey that responded. So it was a pretty positive, pretty strong response rate, certainly many times greater than we get during any election. One question was regarding the removal of the Party Bridge. 65% of those who were surveyed responded in favor to say yes, remove the Party Bridge. And there was a question of dividing the cost. 63% said divide the cost equally. So those are the results. It's an item that, those items will be addressed at a future board meeting. It was, you may recall, the subject of a special assessment district where we began the process of having the hearing. A lot of residents had indicated that they would prefer that we conduct this survey first. So we've done that. We'll bring it back before the board in January. Also, like to give good wishes to Joe Maples, our building official. He's left the township. And I'd also like to acknowledge that our finance director for, I believe, the last 10 years, Glenn Spencer, this is his last meeting. So we wish Glenn happiness and success in his retirement. So thanks a lot, Glenn, for all of your service. Thank you.
I hear retirement comes highly recommended, so.
And and I don't know if there's anything you might be able to report on
Yes, for the Christmas tree lighting, which was held December 1st, we had one of our biggest turnouts in recent years. The weather helped out with that. We had probably about, it's a guess, 50 to 75 young kids that came to see Santa Claus, plus we had the high school choir, which did a fantastic job, and the high school band, which also was equal to the choir. And just glad that everybody came out. It was a really nice night, and special thanks to the maintenance personnel for decorating the tree, all the Parks and Rec members. Special thanks to Santa Claus for showing up, and the fire department for making sure that Santa could arrive. And just like to see more people, even more people next year. It was a really nice event.
well, it was a strong turnout, and I saw one parent of a youngster, and he said he didn't know whether his son was more interested to see fire truck or Santa Claus. So, but truly, the looks on the little kids' faces is the best part of that event. So, and thank you, Frank, to you and your family for the efforts you put into putting that event on as well. Are there any other announcements?
Yes, just wanted to let everyone know, absentee applications are gonna be going out in the mail right around Christmas time. So you should see those in the mail soon, for the March presidential primary. Make sure when you send those back, you select, the correct party of ballot that you want back. They haven't decided how the ballots are gonna be coded yet, but if it's on there, make sure you select it. But if you need an absentee application, you can contact the clerk's office.
All right, great. Thank you. Any other announcements? All right, we'll move forward. The next item on our agenda we labeled as A1. Board members, the fire department budget is showing a deficit for 2015 and 2016. Currently, the estimate is $278,460. The most recent number for 15 was $180,394 and possibly $98,066 in 2016. There is a need to address this deficit. I am proposing that the general fund loan the fire fund up to $300,000 in order to close this deficit. I further propose that no interest be charged and payment is made from the fire fund to the general fund at a rate of $15,000 per year until the balance is paid. The entire $300,000 may not be required, but I'm asking the board to approve up to this amount for years 15 and 16 to avoid having a need to bring this back before the board in the future.
So Glenn, Ken has on here for 2015, 183.94, but you're showing on the revised budget first page a deficit of 219,552.
Are you looking at the budget amendment
Yeah,
on page?
the very
No.
first page that you just handed us tonight, it was a revised page.
Mr. York is referring to the cover sheet, Glenn, from the budget that you just handed out.
Right.
The
This
the
one.
revised,
Color.
I'm assuming we're at 0 and that 219 is the actual deficit for this year.
Budget amendment where there's some things highlighted on the prior
budget amendment, item
Bell box
4.
in the middle, it says there's gonna be, I'm expecting a deficit of 236, but it consists of these two numbers up on the top, 56. So the rest of the fund balance, which will then be down to 0.
Okay.
And 180 would be
The net.
the part that's the big, so that's where.
Okay, so the 180 came
Cash
from
got
there.
those numbers from.
All right, that makes sense.
Now, I suppose in the future, if this board wants to readdress this, certainly we have that ability. If we find that 300,000 isn't necessary, we want to amend it, obviously we can. If we find that the payment terms are concerned, we have that ability, but at this point, I think this is a possible loan that would certainly satisfy the auditors, as well as, keep the fire operating through 2016.
Now, I do have a out-of-the-box idea. And I talked to Glenn about this probably about 2.5 weeks ago when this item was first brought up. And if you remember, board members, we spent about $100,000 to go to arbitration. And one of the items that all right, 200,000. Okay, $200,000. I stand corrected. And one of the items that was vigorously debated was the fact that the fire union felt that they were entitled to using general fund money for the fire fund. So we have a fire fund that we have a tax for. That was in a deficit at the time. We went to the arbitration. Obviously, the fire union's gonna say that all the money in the township is theirs. Obviously, management's gonna say, no, our general fund is our general fund. We have a dedicated tax for fire. So in order to preserve that separation of funds, because we do, I'm anticipating we end up back in arbitration, the fire contract ends next year. That's a 50-50 shot at this point. There is gonna be an argument made once you do this loan, that now that opens up the door for the general fund to be used for the fire fund, not just the dedicated, income tax. So to preserve that, I had a discussion with Glenn, and this is just out of the box, but to keep it in the fire fund family, we have how much money in the OPEB for fire? Glenn, 1 point something million?
The entire fund has got, 3.5 million in it, so fire's probably 900,000 or $1 million.
Okay, so there's $1 million in the OPEB. You could actually take $180,000 from the OPEB, pay, either healthcare or retiree healthcare, doesn't matter, you can use that fund for either or. And then you're keeping our general fund from doing a loan or commingling at this point. That's not to say that, we got a millage, we're gonna be talking about a millage later, but that would certainly keep, those funds separated, and we wouldn't have that argument, possibly at arbitration. And the arbitrator, just so you know, did rule in our favor on that item, that the fire fund is the fire fund, and they don't have any say to the general fund or moving that money into the fire fund for arbitration purposes, or for, benefits or salaries or any of that. So that's just an idea, one idea.
And I thought about that, and I looked at the reason I thought of that, and I thought, that might not be a great idea, is because our OPEB account actually earns pretty good interest when we invest it. The money that we have sitting in the bank at Chase, we break even on fees and interest, essentially. And that, you know what I mean? That was the difference for me.
Okay, so to that point, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m., when the FOMC rears their ugly head from their monthly meeting that they're gonna raise the interest rates. You know, it's probably at 70-30 right now, that they are gonna raise the interest rates, which is gonna change the interest considerably. You know, but, so that being said, a couple other items to this, to the loan. To do this for 20 years seems far too long for me. We're putting that on another board. We don't know what's gonna happen in the future. You know, we should put something in here, if whatever way we go, if you decide to do the loan, I think you should put a qualifier in here that says that, you know, at the board's discretion, we can pay that back. Whatever board that is. So if, you know, 3 years, 4 years, if this, you know, we have an 8.2 millage rate at, you know, later on, if that passes, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't pay that back right away.
Well,
You know,
and
but,
when
but once we put this in, you know, and payment is 15 years, you know, blah, 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 we always end up sitting in a meeting at some point with people saying, nope, it says 20 years at $15,000 and you're not touching our money.
Well, can I, maybe we can address there's a couple issues there? Sure.
Yeah.
I also had, was wondering about the repayment terms, and as you said, Mr. Verkest, we can change it.
At any time. I tried to say that up front when I announced the
course.
item, that we have that opportunity. I suppose as much as 2 years ago, we hadn't contemplated the thought of a loan.
So could we?
2 years from now, we may be looking at a completely different financial condition and change those
Of
terms.
course. So in order just to take that one issue off the table, could we modify it to say, starts at 15,000 and to be addressed, or so,
But it
I
doesn't,
think that,
it still would require action. If we want to change it, we have to say something now. So.
But I think it's important to define that that's a minimum number.
so why don't
You
we
know what I mean?
say,
So that way-
why
so
why
that
don't
way
we
it's
say
not-
that?
it's just that, it's a
15,000
minimum.
minimum,
Okay, right? But under what terms would you increase the minimum? Because someone said so? Wouldn't it really require board action to do something else?
course.
That's why I didn't try to modify it.
Right.
Because if this says 15,000 unless who decides to make it more than 15,000? And does this board really want to relinquish that right? Or would they want to address that at some point in the future?
I would
That's why I
think that-
didn't try to put a modifier.
right, I would think that the board would want to address it. I would just think that we need to make it clear. I agree with Mr. York that I realize it can be modified, but that's 20 years, right? That's a long time.
Right.
And I would simply want to just maybe a phrase in that would indicate that 15 is the minimum, or there's, I don't know, just modify it to some extent. That's all.
And I understand, but when I literally tried to draft this, I couldn't think of a mechanism that would say the board has the right to modify it in the future. That's a given. The board has the right to modify it in the future, and I wouldn't try to take that away and say the 3 full-timers can change it. If we want to change it, we'd say, hey, things are doing better, we should revise that to 45,000 a year. That would be great if we find ourselves in that situation. What I didn't want to do is in the short term, indicate some repayment schedule that was burdensome to the one fund that is in the worst shape. So I tried to pick a number that I thought was manageable moving forward. Long term, I think there's a great likelihood we'll be able to address this, but I can't say when. So that's why I didn't try to put it in there. But I definitely agree with you, and like I say, when I announced the item, I said the board has the opportunity to change this in the future. I just don't like anybody other than this board having that authority.
So why don't we just say that? Why don't we just put a sentence in after that saying the board has the opportunity, you know,
At
even
the
though
board's
it's,
discretion, at
even though it's
15,000
implied.
per year
I'm
at
okay
the-
with that, but it's redundant. It's
well-
it's already given, so
It's
I have no
not.
problem. If someone wants to make a motion, you can modify it to include that statement.
Right.
I'm not opposed to that.
Good, so that's one issue. Right, okay, good.
Right, so what happens there is, you know, we go into arbitration and they say, here's your thing, and we argue it for 6 hours because we made a motion that it says 15,000 for 20 years, and now we want to pay it back at $45,000, say. That becomes an issue, believe me.
Okay. Was there another issue, Mr. Patanji,
Well,
or that was it?
I was wondering, I mean, Mr. York brings up the notion of potentially, if it's a loan that has potential implications, and well, I respect your opinion, and I certainly wouldn't want to see that happen. So do we need to discuss that? The issue of what we earn in the OPEB account versus not, I don't know, what do we earn? I mean, so just
Okay,
put
so the
put it
OPEB
put it in dollars and cents for me. 200,000 in a year in the OPEB account earns what?
Probably about 7%,
7%.
roughly, because
Right.
in the OPEB, it runs like a pension fund.
Right.
So it opens up the whole world of stocks, bonds.
Right. As opposed to speculating what ifs, the assumed rate of return within our pension funds, we operate
Right,
and
right.
we give the
Got it.
actuary an assumption of 7%. And at least I know in the general fund, which is managed also, which is the same manager as the OPEB account, we've, certainly hit that benchmark over a period of time. So 7%, I agree with Mr. York, is a safe assumption.
Yeah, it's just long-term returns
No,
over
understood.
the
I get
market.
it.
It can
So,
go up and down.
Not
year over year.
insignificant.
Right.
You know.
$14,000 a year, something like that.
Right. So you'd asked the question about how might this impact a future arbitration. I think it's important to understand that when the state modified or fine-tuned, if you will, the 312 process, one of the things that they asked or that they included in the latest legislation was a greater emphasis on ability to pay. So the reason why this became an issue is, for example, within cities, if you look at the tax structure, say within Sterling Heights, you're going to see less of a dedicated fire millage. You're going to see a city-wide millage. And then the city decides how much of that goes towards police, towards fire, towards any number of items. On the other hand, within township government, it's typical that you won't see that. What you'll see is specifically a dedicated millage for police, a dedicated millage for fire. So the argument that was made before the arbitrator was, is the township broke? Yes or no? Well, is the fire fund broke? And if there's money in the general fund, is that a factor? So that same argument exists whether we make a loan or not, in my opinion, because it's the very reason we're making a loan. If I were commingling the funds, I would just say take 300,000 and put it in the fire fund. By saying that I'm giving them a loan, in my opinion, I'm further emphasizing the fact that we don't consider those funds commingled. We have a millage dedicated for fire, and any money in that millage can only go for fire. If I loaned them 300,000, whether I were the general fund or whether I were a fire truck manufacturer, I would expect them to repay the 300,000. The only thing this board is really doing is they're giving them 300,000 at no interest.
Aren't we mandated to balance that out?
Sure, but you could balance that by reducing expenditures. You could
Right,
say, well,
right.
we'll eliminate personnel, and now we're balanced. This is what I perceive to be the best way to cover that gap, satisfy the auditors, as well as, in my opinion, keep a firewall between the general fund and the fire fund. That's the reason for the loan with specific repayment terms. So if I were to argue that in the future, I think the argument is the same. I don't think it gets any better or any worse with the action that we're doing.
Supervisor, I do agree with you. I don't think there's, if it's a loan coming from general fund, it's just that. I really don't see any crossover or, infection from one loan to the other.
And Darren, you said the arbitrator already ruled that that
We
was
ruled
the
in our
case.
favor on that, yeah. I think we spent, seemed like a full day or half day on this item,
Okay.
back and forth. One other item I would say about this, I wouldn't do the whole $300,000 right now. I do what we need and bring it back because it gives no incentive for anybody to look at anything else. It's like a building project. Whenever we have 10%, it just seems all of a sudden that it's, the cost plus 10%. If we need to do this again next year, I think it should be brought back to the board next year. That's just, once again, my opinion.
Well, and the concern I have with that is we're literally approving a budget amendment tonight, or at least I'll be asking this board to approve a budget amendment for $180,000, which we don't have. Furthermore, we're going to approve a 2016 budget, and we have to have a source of money for the $98,000. It's disingenuous for us to say, let's spend $98,000. Where's it coming from? I don't know, but let's just do it. So if I don't establish a source, I don't think we're being open and transparent if we don't at least approve $278,460. And again, within reason, that gap is less than 10% of the total amount. So what I'm saying is might as well just round it off to 300,000. I'm open to anything, but I can't see approving an amount less than 278, because we're sitting here today saying that's the gap, 278,000.
And the way I look at what this year has to go, next year is, although it's a loan, it's more so a line of credit that we'll have to manage throughout next year. And tonight, we do have to approve a balanced budget, and you need that source of revenue.
Correct.
So we might find a way to say we had 2 retirements and we brought somebody else in that costs us less, and we'll save the money. And we're, any number of things could change within that budget that changes that number.
Glenn, when you talked to the auditor, did he say a 0% interest rate? We could do that, or did he say we have to have something?
That part I didn't ask about. According to the state treasury, you actually have to approve some way of resolving a deficit. Otherwise, they just declare that you're in a deficit position, and they give you 1 year to get out of it, and then the emergency manager shows up on your door, so.
Well, we're there.
It's not like this is optional, you really have to make some sort of.
I mean, but we're there right now. We're now digging into general fund money, and it's only a slow draw at this point. I
Well, they
mean,
looked
that's
at-
the trigger. That's a trigger at Treasury is when you start taking other money and putting it in there, that's a trigger. And we talked about this the other day in the auditor, and you have to report that to the Treasury that we have a trigger. And we're running.
And you look at all of the general government funds in a lump, and then the non-government funds in a lump.
And that's-
water
And that's an important point of clarification. The trigger isn't moving unrestricted funds into a fund, it's moving restricted funds into a purpose which they do not serve. The general fund dollars, although we have dedicated them towards general fund purposes, don't have that same restriction.
Aren't restricted.
Well, I understand that, Adam. I'm just saying that.
Well, you said that
This
that's
is what
a
I'm
trigger,
saying.
but it's not a trigger.
For 4 years, we've deficit spent at $500,000, $500,000, $500,000. We've completely wiped out the fire fund. There's nothing left in it other than the tax dollars. Now we have 2.1 or 2.2, whatever, in the general fund dollars, and now we're dipping into that at this point. At some point, and we'll talk about the millage later. But if that millage doesn't pass, we need to have a serious discussion, because now you're on a slow bleed. You have to stop at some point the bleeding. And if you don't, you're gonna have the EFM walking through the door. It's that simple. Your bank account, you drain it, you drain it. It's pretty common sense to me. In our general fund, I'll also say this with our general fund, we're gonna take $300,000 out, so now we're at, say, 1.9. If we lose that lawsuit to the insurance company, that's what, $550,000, Mr. Huth? Now we've taken what was a generally healthy fund balance, and now our back's up against the wall. Those events may or may not occur, I don't know, right? I don't know what's gonna happen. But, I always plan on the worst. So, I'm hoping that we win that case. I certainly don't wanna lose it, and we'll go on appeal, but, it is what it is. So while we might look healthy today, tomorrow we might not. You have to be cognizant of that.
Any other discussion, or is there a motion this evening?
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve a loan of up to $300,000 from the general fund to the fire fund without interest, period. Payment terms are to be at $15,000 per year, starting in 2017, and may be modified by the Board of Directors,
Board of Trustees.
Board of Trustees at their discretion.
Sounds good.
Support.
All right, got a motion by Mr. Batanti, with support by Mr. Brado. We talked about it a fair amount. I don't know if there is further discussion. If not, I'll open the floor for public comment.
Matt Sarr here from County Fire do have the arbitration award available, and, I cannot find anything in there that says, the funds can't be commingled. I could be mistaken, maybe there was something else stipulated during that time, but, I do not have anything, in the 312 award that states that.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Jim Senstock, 31698 CN1. I'm at a loss. I'm at a complete loss. You need $180,394,000, but you're going to get $300,000. That's crazy. That's unbelievable. And then you're not going to charge interest on it. That's even more unbelievable. You have the funds in an OPEB account that would allow you to borrow money that's designated as firefighter OPEB account. It keeps it in the same fund. You know what? There's a penalty for what you're telling me. The penalty is 7%. That's what you ought to be charging on this loan. There's no incentive whatsoever to try to make this any better. At $15,000 a year, you'll go through 5 boards. 20 years, 5 different boards are going to have to deal with this. How dare you? I'm looking at your budget that's coming up, and there's $98,000 that says loans proceeds, $98,066. This is the 2016 budget. You know what? You want to make that budget balance? Go back up above and start taking the money out that's equivalent to $98,000, and that's it. That's your new budget. There's no loan amount. There's a budget. I mean, we can look at all kinds of different things here that you could take stuff out on. Well, geez, let's talk a little bit about that. Equipment expense, $40,000. Firefighter equipment, $15,000. All that is a slush fund. It's a reserve account. So I'm paying to create a reserve account for those things, and yet I'm paying $98,000 and I'm not getting anything back? What is the matter with this? You people aren't even thinking like businessmen at all. $98,000. Geez, and they don't even need it. It's just a line item in the budget. Let's talk about this. What about if we just said no hydrant rental this year, or half of it? That's $23,000. If you can't make up $98,000 in this budget without borrowing it from our general fund surplus budget, you guys aren't doing your job. Very simply, you're not doing your job. You're taking the easy way out every single time there's some hard decisions to be made. And I'm getting sick and tired of it. Of course, I'm just Jim Sunstock. You don't have to listen to me. But I think you're going to find out the residents are getting just as tired with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Serville, resident. There's a number of things that I have a problem with here. Number one, $15,000 repayment on a $5 million budget is chump change. That sounds like a minimum payment on a credit card. If they can't afford to pay more than that, then they don't need the money. But that said, if you need $180,000 or $214,000, whichever the number is, just to get through the rest of the year, then how can the deficit for next year be only $98,000? Why don't you tell the public the truth? The deficit for next year, if you look at not your voodoo economics that you have for balancing budgets by moving money around, but actually look at what comes in and what needs to go out, you're talking about $500,000 is what you need next year. You're only putting $98,000 in there because you want to get elected next time. So tell it like it is. You need $500,000. You're going to be coming back in the middle of next year and saying, oh, we need more money. If you're going to loan money, 2 things. If in fact these funds are separate, then I feel that you should have to charge interest. Darren pointed out something. When in 2004, when he took office, we were making good money on even our float money was making good money. And it's gonna come back again. We can't keep on the zero interest rates the way Obama's been doing. It's gonna go up. The true rate of inflation is 2 or 3%, and they're charging nothing. So you're locking yourself in for 20 years, and you might be losing $100,000 in interest by the time you're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Rice, North River Road. I find this voodoo math astonishing. Not too long ago, we had a medical situation at our house. My wife was working in the garden. My brother passed away. She went to the hairdressers to get her hair taken care of before we went to my brother's funeral in northern Michigan. At that time, she was driving home from the hairdresser, and she passed out and knocked over 2 mailboxes, drove herself home, turned around the neighbor's driveway, and pulled into the garage and closed the door. The ambulance was summoned by one of the neighbors, and all the legal beagles were there. And at that time, I heard about it from one of the neighbors, and I rushed home from where I was to take care of my bride. And mind you, I've been a resident of this community for over 45 years. I got a bill for $800 and some from the fire department to transport my wife from Harrison Township to Beaumont Hospital. Now, why did we go to Beaumont Hospital? Because that's where all her medical records were. So I thought that it's better to send her where those records were. In the event that she should have a heart attack or some other medical malfunction, it's best that she goes where those records are, so they don't have to retest her for all the tests that have already been accomplished. That's called common sense. But when I got that bill, and I was informed by the fire department that I would get that bill, but that's a good investment in my wife. But I find it astonishing that we could take the ambulance service and give it over to MedStar, where most of you guys in the fire department got your training, was for MedStar, and save money and cut our staff down. You wouldn't need 5 more people in the fire department to do that. So you do the math, and you do the retirement, and you do all the other iniquities that go with the system. It's non-functional, and you're going to find out that you're pedaling backwards. You're going to throw all of that money out of the general fund, which could jeopardize our well-being in this community very well, all right? And you're not thinking about the outcome of it. You're not looking to a solution of it. If you want to see the bill that we got, it's right here. It's $686.25 plus the additional cost, all right? Does that make a hell of a lot of a sense for a resident to vote for a tax increase or to vote for 5 more firemen so that they can get more niceties and we get screwed? It's unacceptable.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. There was a suggestion made that we should be charging interest. If we're charging interest, ultimately, that puts a greater burden on an already underfunded fund, and the only people that are gonna make up that gap are our residents. If we charge interest from one fund and deliver it to another fund, one fund is making a profit at the expense of another fund. If we want that, we just take $10,000 from the fire fund and put it in the general fund. Using the OPEB, as we discussed, I believe is irresponsible because we are making interest. There was a suggestion made that interest is coming back. Well, if it does, then we can readdress these loan terms and any other terms at that time. But at this point, we don't have any solid evidence that that's going to happen. I'm hopeful, like everyone else, that that does occur. The deficit for 2016, 98,000, it's not 500,000. I would love for someone to show me where it's 500,000. The fact is, we made some pretty substantial changes to our retiree health care plan, and that in a large part reduced our expenses from 2015 and before to 2016 and moving forward. So in addition to the fact that we've been at 27 firefighters for quite a while, we're at 25, and we're anticipating 25 or as little as 24 in 2016. We've also made some other cuts in the budget that have resulted in the reductions, and that's the reason why our deficit at this point is projected to be 98,000. And then lastly, there was a suggestion made to give transport to MedStar and save money. For anyone that was at the firefighting committee workshop, the assessment committee flushed that out and found that in fact that was not true. Giving transport to MedStar would not in fact save us money. It would create a greater deficit. I don't know if there's any other comments. Hearing that, oh, sorry.
Just the only thing, just as a point of clarification on the motion, you had "and may be modified." I'd sort of like to include, the intent is that the 15 is a minimum. I think your intent was that the number could be modified up, not, I guess we can always do whatever we want, but,
Well, I would amend it to say amount may be increased by the board by the Board of Trustees at its discretion, I think, is that what we use?
So that would be the payback amount.
The payback amount, the repayment amount could be increased by the Board of Trustees at its
Okay,
discretion.
Mr. Barado's continued support?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, and I don't have the complete motion as you stated it, but maybe Mr.
I
Witt-
do.
Okay, good.
We had a motion by Mr. Batanti, seconded by Mr. Brado to approve the loan up to $300,000 from the general fund without interest. The payment terms are $15,000 per year starting in 2017 and may be increased at the board's discretion until the balance is paid in full.
All those in favor, signify.
Do a roll call, please.
Sure. Mr. Witt?
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capel?
Yes.
Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Verkowski?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda is item A2, which was originally item 4 from the consent agenda. These are the budget amendments for the year end for 2015. And the reason we did pull these is because it does make a reference to a loan amount of $180,000, and we wanted to make sure that the board approved that loan before we included that as a budget amendment. I don't know if there's any discussion, if there is a motion to approve or accept the budget amendments.
Could we just, if we're gonna discuss it first, maybe just talk a little bit about the amendments in the water and sewer fund,
Okay?
now that we're, I'm on page,
Well, there's not,
second from the last.
okay.
And on the revenue side, some pretty big swings, we could just talk about that.
Okay,
And I could ask specific questions, but I kinda just like, I don't know, if Mr. Axtell or somebody could run down the list and indicate, the large $837,000 federal grants, no. $440,000 water and sewer adjustment amount. Just curious.
sure. Glenn, could you speak to that?
I didn't understand what the question was.
So I'm looking at the second from the last page in budget adjustments, and the adjusted amounts under water and sewer fund revenue. And I'm just, there's some very large numbers there, and I'm just wondering a little background on that. If we could get a little background.
So I would say,
The short answer to your question, if I'm understanding it, is the water purchases actually went down due to volume and the fact that the water tank's working the way it's supposed to finally, so that allows the city of Detroit to reduce the per unit cost. And on the sewage side, we need to talk to Mr. Morocco about that because they keep raising the cost of sewage collection and raising. It's gone flat now, which is a good thing. But it was just higher this year. They increased it in the last 6 months of the year. they don't tell you that until partway through the year, so I wasn't able to budget at the beginning of the year for that, so I had to make an adjustment.
Thank you. And what about the federal grant? Was that something that, I don't know, I might have missed in conversation? It was budgeted for, we didn't,
It's been an ongoing thing, that is, what's called a SAW grant.
okay,
Maybe I could have labeled it better, but it's rolling kind of from year to year, so
Okay.
it's a moving target for me in terms of, say, so much of the revenue's coming in this year, so much expense is hitting in a different year. Actually, if you had nothing, no other expenses, the number would be negative one year and
Okay.
positive another year, because normally you have to spend the money first and then apply to get the money back from the state. So that's what's going on with that right now. We got a little bit of money back from the state because the bills, the work was done and the bills are starting to roll in. But it's just not the way it was planned at the beginning, where in a year and a half, we were going to do all this work. The engineers were gonna be ready to go, the contractor would be ready to go, and we just spend all the money, get the money back 3 weeks later, and it just didn't work out that way.
Those were some of the issues we had discussed regarding projects and costs
Right.
of projects, and hitting some times when the economy bounced back and we were at the top, and so we actually rebid some contracts to save money, and so
Okay.
we expended a lot more time with these projects than initially intended.
And I would say on the expenditure side, if you look down numerically, the item that's 802, you can see that we had originally budgeted a substantially larger amount for engineering
Right,
services.
right.
And that didn't come to fruition in calendar year 2015. But the SAW grant, the work surrounding the SAW grant is ongoing. So that Wade Trim is doing, I would say the largest portion of that would be the modeling of our sewer system. And there's a lot of field work and then engineering work, computer work. So that work is ongoing, but the invoicing, once we're invoiced and our ability to say, okay, we've spent this money and ask for that grant to be paid back to us. If, in other words, if, we'll say that if Wade Trim didn't do as much work, or at least if they didn't invoice us for as much work as we thought, then we're not able to go back to the state and say, here, look at this, we've spent $1,000, give us 800. So both of those items, although they certainly don't balance out, they correspond to each other.
and just thank you, it was some big numbers, and I certainly do recall the discussion on all those projects. I just think it's worth spending a little time on. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion regarding the budget amendments at year end for 2015?
Make a motion to approve the budget amendments for 2015 as presented.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Okay, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominoil to approve the 2015 year-end budget amendment as presented. Discussion, board members? Hearing none, and, we got public comment? I'd remind
I do
everyone.
have just one comment that, of course, I disagree with the way that we're handling that loan, and I think it's gonna lead to problems down the road. So my vote will reflect that.
Okay, we'll open the floor for public comment.
Jim Senstock, 31698 CM1. It says here that you're going to adjust the prior year fund balance by another $104,624 under the general fund. So what does that leave us as far as the amount of money in the general fund surplus? Not including, now we'll be talking about giving another 300,000 out of that. There's 104,000 there. I guess this board has consistently been spending money out of that general fund surplus on and on and on and on every year. And the question started the year before. I don't know, what was the year before? I mean, but the fact of the matter is, somewhere along the line, we're gonna run out of that surplus just like we run out of the fire department surplus. You guys are supposed to be shepherds of our money, not shepherds of spending it. As far as the water and sewer fund, I'm looking at that, and Mr. Batani did raise a couple interesting questions. So, water income was projected to be $2,940,000, and it went down $440,000. So that's the according to you, that is the amount we saved with the city of Detroit by putting in that tank. We ought to put several more in if that's how much money we save. Sewer income went up another $220,000. So, okay, sewer income, so let's go down and look at what the sewer expenses or sewer treatment was. The actual expenses was $144,500. Wow. Geez, that's about $60-some thousand or more. So there is that big of a float in between those two numbers. And I'm bringing that up right now because you guys are coming in to ask for more money from the water and sewer fund, from the sewer fund specifically, later on in the meeting. God, I'm looking at this and it doesn't look like that's a true statement. You know what? I expect, and of course you don't care what I expect, but the residents expect that you people are going to start saving some money somewhere along the line. If you don't, you won't have to worry about being here next year. And whether it's 20 years to repay that back or 2 years, there'll be a new board making that decision because you guys aren't doing it. You aren't getting it. You're still not getting it. And we're tired of it. There was an article in the newspaper December 2nd or so, about the poverty rate in the Detroit metro area. Did you know the poverty rate in Harrison Township is 11%? Under the poverty level. It was 10% in 2009. It's going up. So when next time I hear out of any of you that, oh wait, our millage rate doesn't reflect what was in 2008, 2009. Well, you know what? Our incomes for the people that live in this township don't reflect what was available in 2008 and 2009. There was people at that time that had $15, $18, $24, $26 jobs. Now they're lucky if they get $12 jobs or they're retired. And you guys just keep blowing the money, one right after another. And you make every excuse under the book why it's okay. It's not okay. And it's going to have to stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Karczewski. I'm not going to be very popular with a lot of employees and retirees. But my husband retired, and I retired, and I'm still working. My husband has to pay for his insurance, part of his insurance. Can you please tell me why your retirees don't have to pay for anything? Absolutely nothing. I don't see anything in the budget that they pay. Is there anything, any place that they pay for anything? There's a time before years ago, when that was a great thing, but now everybody's hurting. And I know that's not fair. We all worked. But I can't afford all this 50 cents here, 50 cents there, 50 cents here. You want an increase, you're going to increase the fire department. And I understand why the fire department, 100%, I understand why they don't have the money. I understand that what the millage was, our tax increase on our houses are less. And I understand that. I really, really do. It doesn't help because I don't have the money either. You want an increase on the water department, the police department, the SMART. Last year you went for the library. We're doing the zoo. We're doing all those different things. That all adds up. Do you know that I knew this was all coming up, that I've been paying, when I make my mortgage payment in escrow, I put extra money every single month because I do not want to get hit with a huge increase come January because we can't afford it. I'd like to know why everybody else isn't helping out with the money shortage that is there. You want to know where you need money to balance the budget without taking all this extra money? Why isn't anybody else helping out? You know, you do contracts, but sometimes everybody's got to give and take. And I know I'm not going to be the most loved person come tomorrow. But you know what? There comes a time where everybody's got to give a little bit too. Not just the people that live in this township. We all don't make 50,000, 60,000 and up. And I bet you half these people in this room don't make that much money that's in this room. That kind of money every year.
Thank you.
We need to look at the practical standpoint of these funds. The prior comments that the lady made are quite evident when you go in the supermarket and you see senior citizens stealing a banana off of the rack and eating it and throwing the skin on the side. You have to be blind not to see that. The cost of government is too immense. The perks are too immense. I would love to see the paperwork on MedStar versus the fire department doing the runs. I would love to see it, and I would know how to break the bread on that. I sat with those folks when they sent MedStar, being those folks, and sent their people to New York during the problems for free. I didn't see anybody from the fire department going there for free. All right, I don't see the generosity from anybody other than the township taxpayers. The generosity needs to be spread around this community so that we could all survive. Detroit is #1 city in the United States in poverty and in lack of workability, all right? That didn't just happen overnight. Do you want to be #2? Line up your money, line up the board so they make good, sound decisions. And I tell you that the road you're headed down is a disaster because $300,000 is not chicken feed. And it's $300,000 at no interest rate, and where are you going to get it back? Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Question was asked about whether employees contribute to their health care expenses, and retirees, they do. It is not a budgeted item, it's not an item listed. As far as contracts, each union has had at least 2 rounds of concessionary contracts. There is no longer any new hires in the township that receive retiree health care, so there certainly have been concessions that have been made, but in addition, there have been promises that have been made by prior boards for many years, and at this point, we have a legal obligation to continue to honor those. So we're trying to do that as cost-effectively as possible. So at least to try to answer some of the questions there.
So, the answer to the retiree question is about 90% of our retirees do not pay any form of health care or deductible. It was up
disagree
until,
with
I
that.
believe, about 2008, when those people retired, that they had to pay the $13.50 if you were an AFSCME employee into your HSA, out of the $2,700 or $2,600. And are fire paying anything right now? Do we have any retirees in fire that are paying?
Yes.
We either have 1 or 2 firemen that are paying half of the $2,600 deductible of $1,300. But the majority, and I would say 90% of our retirees don't pay anything for their health care.
There are co-pays for there is not a retiree that does not have a copay.
Well, that's a different question than what Linda was asking. That's, I think she was saying toward the health care themselves. I would also, and I know that I'm trying not, I'm not even gonna argue tonight, I'm just gonna state a fact like I've done many times, and once again, this is gonna be a brick wall. But at the beginning of the meeting, we had roughly $2.3 million in our general fund. We just spent $300,000 to the fire department, so now we have $2 million in our general fund. And we're just taking another $225,000 out of the general fund balance to pay for this year's deficit. So we are now at about $1.75 million in our general fund.
Any other board comment?
Well, I mean, we all know that we're loaning money to the fire fund, and none of us are happy about it. But we put together a committee, the committee sat down for months, discussed everything at length, and everyone agreed that we need to do some things to fix this hole in the budget. Now, short of us loaning the fire fund money, we know there's gonna be some more steps we're gonna have to take, but we have to do something. We can't let this sit this way.
Well, I don't mean
You
it.
said that a year ago.
Look, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody.
No,
all right?
I'm
But
not
quite
arguing
honestly,
your point. I'm
Mr.
saying,
Votto,
you even said this a year ago.
I was saying it 4 years ago when we had the first $500,000 deficit
Right.
that, every
had to
year,
do
and I
something.
voted no on every one of those budgets, saying, come on, guys, we gotta do something. Come on, guys, we gotta do something. And quite honestly, I am quite worried that we're down a path that we can't
I agree.
pull ourselves out of.
I
at
don't think
this
But
any of us
I don't
like
think,
this.
I don't think there's anybody on this board that's not open to suggestions that still provide the services that residents have requested. So if you got something, we're all ears.
And I'm okay with us loaning, and I gotta restate what Ken said. I'm okay with us loaning money to the fire fund at no interest. Because if we charge interest, the taxpayers are the people that are gonna pay that interest back. I'm okay with that. I don't wanna charge the taxpayers any more than we have to. I mean, I don't understand why that's a problem for some of the people. They don't understand that that fund giving money to that fund and adding interest, the taxpayers are paying it. I don't understand why that's a problem.
I don't think
I'm
I
trying to make
said
this,
that.
no, I'm trying to make this as painless,
All right.
you know.
Well, I think the ultimately what this boils, we're gonna have another discussion about millage.
Right.
And in the time I've been on the board, I've heard a lot of high-level conversation about what could be done or couldn't be done with the fire department. And quite frankly, and I'll say this when it's appropriate, is that ultimately we need to provide a certain level of service.
Right.
And you can, well, a certain level of service must be provided. It's a responsibility that we have. And unfortunately, it's going to cost X amount of dollars to do that. And I don't like the deficit either. I just don't, I don't know of a way to do that and still preserve public safety, and take care of that, and preserve, not funding equipment repairs, or not providing proper firefighting equipment or uniforms for the fire department. I don't believe that's the case. This board did take action on employee health care, and there was a substantial savings. Not only was there a savings, there was a cost avoidance. The action that the board took was probably net $500,000 savings. So when residents, in excess of $500,000. So when residents ask, what has the board been doing about expenses, I think that's a significant thing that the board has done about expenses.
Do you know that we passed that motion in 2006
What motion?
to change the retiree health care?
No, I don't know
and
that,
and
sir.
nothing was ever done?
No,
I'm just saying, nothing was ever done.
okay, it was done now, Darren.
But all I'm saying is,
Actually, in
I'm not
2006,
getting,
the
I'm not getting,
retirees did
I'm not
transfer
getting into
healthcare.
an argument. All I'm saying is, I want everybody to be aware of how much money we have. I'm just making a comment on that,
Just as a point of
Pure-
clarification,
pure and
Mr. York,
simple.
in
And-
2006, when that motion was made, I remember working with Mr. Forlini as the supervisor to initiate a change in the retiree health care. We sat in this room and had meetings with retirees. There were changes made. They might not have been to the same level of savings as this, but they were made at that time. So
we had a post-65 retiree, and we've been paying roughly $30,000 a year for their insurance.
No, I'm not saying it was
You know,
everyone,
it
but there
doesn't
was
take,
changes
it doesn't
to
take
retiree.
common sense over that whole time period for somebody to say, that when you're post 65, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, is the primary insurer. It's that simple. I don't know why over all this time we were spending that money, and today isn't the first day I mentioned that. I've mentioned it for 10 years now about those one or two people, but nobody wanted to take any action on it. That's just one little thing. Over 10 years, that's $200,000 lost.
I'll remind the board that the item before us is the budget amendment for the year end. It's typically handled under the consent agenda along with other routine items, and I would say that we should probably try to keep our comments to the budget amendments. Are there any other comments? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to accept the year-end budget amendments for 2015. All those in favor
Need a
signify.
roll call, please?
I will, in the future, if you know you'd like a roll call, could you, let me know kind of in advance a little bit?
Well, okay, so you can assume that I'm gonna want a roll call on the rest of the items.
Fair enough. Mr. Witt, will you please do the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Verkast?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda is item A3. It was originally posted as item F3 on the agenda. Board members, water and sewer rates are comprised of two components. The commodity cost, which is the amount that we pay for the actual water to be delivered or for the sewer to be received, and delivery charges. At the April 26, 2010 regular board meeting, the Board of Trustees raised the delivery charge of water from 80 cents per unit to $1.15 per unit, and the per unit service charge for sanitary sewer from 84 cents to $1.39. This was necessary due to changes in our cost to provide services, as well as the fact that, at that time, we were delivering water and sewer services and actually spending more than we were receiving in revenue. So we were actually giving away water and sewer services. We were deficit spending, if you will. It was a pretty substantial increase. Since 2010, the water and sewer budget has increased 16%. But if we remove the actual commodity costs, which is certainly the largest portion of the expense, and as we all know, due to some changes in the DWSD contracts and the Macomb County Wastewater District contracts, that's been a majority of that increase. So if we remove those expenses, over a 6 to 7 year period, the actual cost to provide the service has gone up about 10%. So less than 2% per year. It occurred to me that recently we were discussing the subject of the gas tax that the Michigan legislature has, and it was repeatedly mentioned that since 1997, the cents per gallon tax has not changed. Certainly during that time, the cost to deliver maintenance on our roads has increased substantially. And there was a lot of discussion saying, well, clearly it's irresponsible to think that the amount of revenue from 1997 to provide road repairs and road reconstruction is sufficient today. And I believe the same thing applies with our water and sewer department. So for the last 6 years, or 6.5 years, I'll say, I guess 5.5 years perhaps, we have not modified that cost to deliver the service. I'm proposing a modest increase to the service delivery fees to reflect that. And I'm proposing that we do this as opposed to going from 80 cents to $1.15 every couple decades. I think it's responsible to address that difference a few cents at a time. The amount that I'm proposing is 4 cents per unit for water and 5 cents per unit for sanitary sewer. It's about a 3.5% increase, or the equivalent. I know the water and sewer department typically assumes an average consumption of 25 units of water over a 3-month period. So for that average homeowner, 25 units, it would cost them about 75 cents a month. It's a modest increase, but again, I think the responsible way to address the rate that we charge for water and sewer is a small amount in an incremental phase, as opposed to, practically increasing the rate by 40 to 50% all at once. Is there discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion to increase the delivery charge for water from 115 to 119 per unit service charge, and the per unit service charge for sanitary sewer to from 139 to 144 effective 1/1/2016. Motion reflects an increase of 3.5% or 75 cents per month for an average home using 25 units in a 3-month period, and should generate approximately $81,000 in 2016.
All right, there's a motion by Mr. Vatanti. Is there support?
Support.
Point of did you say 800,000 or 81,000?
I thought I said,
81,000.
did I
81,000.
say,
I think you said 800.
I'm looking for the big bucks, but I'll go with 81,000.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know if it's, easy to pull up or quick to pull up here.
Well, you have it on here as 81,000.
No, I understood. Again, as a reference, the budget for, 2016 for the water and sewer fund is, almost $8 million, $7.8 million, between all of the services. So we're talking about, I guess 1% over the cost, but it's ultimately a recognition that regardless of what we do, there are fixed expenses that the water and sewer department has. There are increases though, just to materials, and, whether I like it or not, we can talk about trying to do things as efficiently as possible, but certain things come at a cost, and, so there's a need to incrementally address those costs.
The biggest thing that this prevents is us saying, hey, we're not gonna put money aside for the next time somebody's sewer needs to be replaced. The concept behind the water and sewer rates, the way they're structured, is that as I pay my rates, if that needs to be replaced, it gets replaced. If you go forward and if you're not funding adequately, when you get to that, you're gonna say, well, I don't have any money. So,
Right, yeah, certainly the biggest, one of the biggest line items within that, water and sewer fund, is this is basically the depreciation, or the money that we set aside for the future to address, deterioration. It's also important to note that the water and sewer fund is an enterprise fund. We cannot use the funds in the water and sewer fund to address, say, for example, needs in the general fund or fire fund, or address police, needs. These funds, a surplus at the end of the year in the water and sewer fund is necessary to make sure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever that schedule is, when there is a failure of a water main or a sewer main, we have the funds available to replace that.
We could always give them a loan if they need it.
I'm looking to see, our depreciation for 2016 is $900,000. So in essence, we're saying we need to budget $900,000 of funds to set aside so that when there is a failure in the system, we have funds available to make those repairs. Harrison Township, along with probably just about every other municipality, is probably underfunded in the amount that they should have for failing infrastructure, or the amount of underground responsibility that we have to provide to residents. This would help us to close that gap. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll open the floor for public comment.
Bill Servil, resident. If 75 cents is approximately what I might have to pay, then there's a couple other charges on there that are maybe 15 times that much. We pay for 2 interceptors. And I don't know who to blame for this, but a few years ago, one of the northern townships complained that they thought they were paying more than their fair share for the interceptor that comes from Richmond, New Haven. So they decided to have a meeting and sit down and reallocate those expenditure, the cost for that interceptor. We do not, to my knowledge, put a single drop of sewage into that interceptor. We put the one in 15-mile interceptor, which we pay for, rightfully so. But because of no due diligence on the part of the township, and I don't know if that's your fault, Mr. Verkest, or if it's your predecessor, but whatever the reason, we didn't send a representative to protect our interests, and therefore they decided to assess Harrison Township for an interceptor that we don't use, and we're gonna pay for it forever. And between that and the 50 million that we're paying for the repair or the purchase, if you will, of that interceptor, in addition to the maintenance of it and building new pump stations and everything, a good half of our bill is probably for those things that have nothing to do with what you use. You'd pay that if you didn't use a nickel. If you didn't use any water, you'd still be paying those fees. They're static. I don't believe they're a percentage, are they? So, you know, let's get with the program, folks. In the future, if something like that comes up, let's send someone there and fight for our rights. Same thing for the spillway. Same thing happened there too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dean Smith, Riverdale Street. Concerning the water, I thought we put the water tower at Union Lake and Metro Parkway in for the event that we would put that in, buy our water at night at a discount from the Detroit Water Department. And the projection of that over, my recollection, that projection over that life of that would save us a couple hundred, 300, it would pay for the water tower and save us a ton of money. So we're asking for a water increase rate. Well, has anybody looked at the projection of what it costs to build that thing, the projection of what the savings, and what went wrong with that if we need a water rate after 4 years, 5 years it's been up? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Sunstock, 31698 CN1. 75 cents per month, that's $2.25 per bill. Yeah, maybe that's not much to me or you guys, but it is to some people. It's gonna generate $81,000. Okay. You're telling me in a $7 million budget, or $8 million budget, you can't generate $81,000 without charging the citizens more money? You're telling me that? I'm looking at this budget that you're gonna be proposing here very quickly, and if you can't knock $90,000 out of it, you guys, again, aren't doing your job. Let's just talk about one thing. How about administration? Oh, wait, what's administration? Well, administration is the cost to pay the people their checks. It's done by the Glenn's office. The only problem is it's $100,000. Well, wait a minute, $100,000 and it gets paid back to, I heard somebody complain about, we don't want to be charging interest to somebody else in it because the residents pay it. Well, the residents are paying it already. It's in their general fund. All this is that $100,000 is a slush fund. Oh, man, we act like we're running out of money in the water and sewer or the fire department, and we charge them an administration fee. The two administration fees that are currently being charged from the fire department and from the water and sewer is over $200,000. How many people work in that office? My gosh, there must be at least 10 people in there. There's 2, plus a finance director. Again, you people don't have any idea how to save money. You have no idea or concept of how to save money for the citizens. The only thing you see is, well, we'll go out and get the money from the residents. Doesn't matter that 11% of the people are on poverty. You know what? Poverty for some of these people, $2.25 is going to be a lot of money for them. Maybe they'll just stop paying their water bill like they do in Detroit. Oh wait, what happens then? Then we charge all these fees for penalties and all that stuff. It's $90,000, $100,000 in here. Penalty interest, you know, all of this money, $90,000. Penalty on water and sewer bills, $90,000. So wait a minute, the poor people, the people that can't afford it, they're gonna pay $90,000 to keep their water on. Again, Do something for the residents. You can make that change without putting $81,000. Sharpen your pencil on this thing. Like I said, it doesn't make any difference to me, but it's gonna make a difference to a lot of people that you raise their water bills 3%, and they're going into an election year. Remember that.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. I'll try to address some of the residents' comments. It was stated that we're assessed and we pay for interceptors that we don't use. That's just simply not true. There's a flow assigned to each interceptor. We contribute to that flow, and the percent that we have and the responsibility of the maintenance and repair of those interceptors is wholly dependent on the amount of flow that we contribute to those interceptors. A resident asked about the water tower at Union Lake. I believe around 1.3, 1.4 million, just round numbers, was the construction cost. There was a savings of possibly $300,000 a year in rates. There is a cost to operate that tank, so let's call it $250,000. We did see, I believe it was July 1st of 14, Harrison Township, of every DWSD customer, had the greatest decrease in our rate based on that tank. We had received rate decreases prior to July 1 of 2014, but we did have some exceedances. We had to explain those, so to get the majority of the savings, July 1st of 2014, we had a reduction in the rates. Per board action, the amount that we charge residents for water, as I've said, is comprised of two numbers. One is an amount per unit that is the amount of money that we use to have the water and sewer personnel do the work, the ladies do the billing, and future repairs to underground. The second component of that, and the largest component, is the commodity cost. Per a prior board action, each year, when we get our rate from DWSD, we do a direct calculation of what that commodity rate is based on what last year's consumption was, and divide that out to the cost, basically a cost per unit. Now, it's important to understand that the cost for sewer is obviously not impacted by the water tank. It only had an impact and a reduction to our water rates. So our rates from took place July 1st of 2014 actually were a reduction in the water rate. Now, if it were this board's desire to keep the number where it was for water, we'd have that ability. This board could have said, don't reduce the rate for water, but literally the commodity charge for water, July 1st, 2014, went down, and as we move forward, that reduction ultimately carries itself. Had we not included the tank, or we didn't have the tank today, we'd be paying a larger amount. So nothing went wrong with the tank. There was a reduction in the commodity rate. Unfortunately, at the same time, DWSD, since that time, 2015, had a pretty substantial increase, and the sewer charge has grown exponentially compared to the water rate. There was a discussion, 75 cents a month, and it'll hurt some people. It's important to understand that's an average consumption. That would not be the rate that, say, a single person might pay, or a senior citizen, or a couple. The average is, say, a family of four. Some people are going to pay a greater amount than that, and some people would ultimately be impacted less. But 75 cents is an average. It's not a per home charge. It was just an estimate. $110,000 administrative charge was discussed. That was a fee that was included, certainly, well, I don't know how far back. I believe it precedes my time on the board. It's important to understand that the $110,000 administrative charge is not unique to Harrison Township, and it comprises more than just payroll. In order to have a water and sewer department, you have to be able to accept bills. So you have a treasurer's department, and you have personnel in the treasurer's department accept those payments. The board of trustees comes with a certain amount of expense to operate. There are HR expenses. There's a whole series of expenses that are associated with providing that support system to the water and sewer department. It's certainly been debated. I've heard it said that it's a large amount, as the one resident said. I've heard from the finance director that it's actually based on some of the estimates that he's done. It's a low amount. and was debated with the fire department during the arbitration. But it has been an amount that's been in place for a long time, and there's little debate that the general operation of the township provides services to the water department and to the fire department. Fire department couldn't exist without the collection of taxes, without an election process to approve a millage. So when we look at all of those expenses, there are a number of things that go into providing water and sewer service. So it can be debated, but it's been in place for, I don't know how long, but for years. So, but that is the fee that the resident made reference to.
So I do have a comment. I was gonna bring this up later in the budget, but I'll bring it up now since we're talking about water rates. You know, several years ago now, what Mr. Servil said, you know, I voted no on that Richmond bond payment because the water flows toward Detroit, and that was a northern, for the northern suburbs, and I thought we should have took those bonds on and not paid them, but the board voted yes on that, and that's water under the bridge. But after that Richmond, if everybody remembers, and this is just another part of your water bill, why our water bills are so expensive. In 2000, I believe it was 10, there was a lady that sat here, and the county had won sued Detroit, and they took over the interceptors all in Macomb County. And at the time I said, you know, that's a bunch of nonsense. We pay in our water bill already to depreciation to Detroit. They chose not to fix our interceptors. And then now the county takes it over, and they stood here, and at the time it started with one or two bonds at about $100,000. And those of you that were here that night, if you remember, I told the lady, it's not just one or two bonds, it's gonna be tons of bonds, and you're gonna be hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'll point out in the budget that starting in 2008, we started at about $157,000 on our water bills. Do you know what that total is today? It grew to, I'll take out the 3 from 2008. We now have 21 separate bonds at a total of $667,000 that you pay in your water bill. That's the biggest chunk of your bill, so that little $15 or $20 a month. And at the time, I said we should have stopped it, but to expound on Bill's, what he said, you know, we ended up paying for that twice, and then you go to this board where, you know, you have Macomb, Wayne, the Detroit board. Funny thing is, I don't understand why they didn't include this in that whole Wayne County, Wayne Oakland County, and relieve us of this burden. But that is a big portion of our water bill, just to expound on what Mr. Servio said.
No question, the bond payments are a substantial burden. It's certainly not the largest portion of our expenses or our water bill. We can see that in the budget, but it is a substantial payment that we make, and we're not insulated. Every community that's connected to the Oakland-Macomb interceptor is paying their share based on their flow rates. There is not a community that's opted out or was able to avoid paying their share.
I understand. I'm just saying that I don't understand why they didn't throw it in with the whole bankruptcy
GLWA.
thing. Yeah.
Right.
I don't, for the life of me, cannot understand why we still own the interceptors, but we're in this other.
But the reason
but
is.
bankruptcy should have took care of that.
But it couldn't. This was no longer, by this point, this was no longer an asset of DWSD. I mean, why shouldn't
Well,
the?
the bankruptcy, there was no rules. You
Well-
could put things in, take things out at that point. I mean,
All right.
you know, I mean, come on.
Sure.
But you know, while this isn't a big amount, I think the angst of people, and I hold this opinion myself, right? Obviously, you know, it's, you know, the gas tax increase, the 20% fee increase, the water rate increases, these bond payment increases. You know, the DTE yesterday came out and said our electric bill's going up $8 a month. When you start taking 100 items that are, you know, what seem to be only $1 or $2 or $8, now you're, you know, you look and you're $200, $300, $400, you know, later. And we'll talk about the millage, later, but that's basically what's happened with these millage rates in total, but I think that's what the angst of the people are, is that just, everybody says, oh, it's only 50 cents, oh, it's only 75 cents, but then you look at the end of the year and it comes out to be, all these 50 cents are $300, you know?
Yep.
I'm not saying it's just us, it's just in
This-
general.
Yeah, this
right?
impacts everyone here,
I'm just
whether we're on
saying
this
in
side of
general.
the table or the other side.
And the threshold of poverty went up 1%. The school of choice also went up. So, hate to say it, but it's gone up too. So,
Further discussion?
Sure.
Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Caproll to increase the delivery charge for water from $1.15 to $1.19, and the per unit service charge for sanitary sewer from $1.39 to $1.44, effective January 1st, 2016. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
yes.
Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkowski?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda is items B1, 2, and 3. Board members, we do have the 2016 budget as prepared. We have a need to have a public hearing, which we'll open in a moment. And after the patrons, those present have an opportunity to address the board, we'll close that public hearing. And before us would potentially be the opportunity to adopt the 2016 budget. I would like to point out something. I believe we discussed this at the workshop, and it may not have, this amendment may not have made it into the budget. And I apologize, I should have, page 22. If you might take a moment and take a look at the budget for on page 22. The DDA, to date, you can see, has captured $6,179 in tax revenue. For 2016, there's a contingency fund listed of $6,000 as an appropriation. Specifically, the Downtown Development Authority has discussed and is planning to do a mailing to the residents and to the businesses in the district. And the budgetary estimate was approximately $500 between printing, envelopes, postage cost, and so forth. So I would ask that we add an item to the DDA appropriations of $500 for printing and postage. And I would rather do that, or propose that, prior to the public comment, in case it affected anybody's public comment. And certainly that can't really be done until we actually make a motion to adopt the budget, but that's an amendment that I propose that we bring forward.
I'll make a motion to open the public